Linda Hirsch.
I'm Jim Carney, and this is EdCast, a program created and produced by educators for everyone interested in education.
Are games the future of education? If you're a computer or board game player, you already know why game playing is so appealing. Now, educators are exploring the potential of games in the classroom and ways they might help students learn faster and better. Today, Professor Rees Shad and teacher Kate Selkirk join me to discuss how they design and use games, both analog and digital, to teach students from middle school to college. We'll discuss the potential of games in education and the questions raised by their new role in the classroom.
Later on in the program, I'll take a trip to Hostos Community College, where we'll see that games are being used to introduce mathematical concepts. But we begin with Linda and her guests in the studio.
You take 2 cards.
Okay, and I turn them over.
Okay. And then you can roll the die.
We're in the middle of playing a game teaching us concepts of Venn diagramming. My guests today are Professor Rees Shad, developer of the Media Design program at Hostos Community College, and Kate Selkirk, a math teacher at Quest to Learn, a New York City public school which uses games throughout the curriculum. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for bringing this game.
Thanks for having us.
Why are games so popular right now in education?
Well, I think right now it's an engagement problem. We have a lot of kids who, as they get older and progress through middle and high school, just get less and less engaged. We have a graphic on the Quest to Learn website that shows, or sorry, the Institute of Play website that shows 30% of adults are not engaged in their job, and I think it's like 30 or 50% of high school students aren't engaged in school. And the sort of earlier you get in school, when kids are playing games in elementary and middle, they're just a lot more engaged and excited.
100%. It's that connection. Okay, if we can get that student to engage with the topic more deeply through play, then it's a score. So,
what is your definition of a game?
Well, Linda, a game is a system, and that can be including assets and the players themselves, whatever materials, the environment, where players engage in artificial conflict. And through a system of clear and distinct rules, they're able to find some quantitative outcomes with which to understand whether or not certain players win or lose and how the team could work together, whatever, depending on the type of game.
And would you define a game in the same way?
I would say you can also reach a goal. So it might not be points, but it might be some other tangible goal that you're reaching. And at Quest, we sort of structure our curricula around game-like learning. So not every activity is a game, but it has the same design principles that a game would have. So you have a challenge, you have a space, you have rules, and ultimately a goal.
Obviously, games are very popular. I mean, we see people playing games on their phones. We see people playing games all the time. What do you each feel motivates game playing?
For me, there's narrative. That's really there's an engagement through storytelling and kind of exploring a narrative that way. But also, for me, I think, well, for me, games are most engaging when I can kind of escape a little bit of the day-to-day. Right?
You mentioned something in a book, the Hive book, that it shouldn't only be luck. That games where it's just luck are not that effective, and you were nodding.
Yeah.
Why is that? I remember reading that in the book, that it's not good if it's just all about luck. Why?
Well, I think about the game War. I played that as a kid, and then eventually you're like, oh wow, I actually can't win. There's nothing that I'm doing as a player that's going to make me win. So when you can blend strategy and luck in a way that's entertaining and engaging, that's the goal.
100%. Yeah, and that strategy really comes from being able to take risks. You know, be able to, I could get more points if I try to do this, or if I risk some points, I can get more points. If there's that element of that, I can begin to strategize for ways to kind of complete a given task or
So some element of player control. I can affect the outcome in some way. So why do you each believe, and I think you each do, believe that games are foundational for learning? what makes them so important in terms of helping kids learn or adults learn?
In mathematics, a lot of times the games can be a sort of, not subversive, but a sort of hidden way to practice and master a skill.
Yeah.
So that's what I use it for. And well,
I completely agree. And also, I like this subversive element.
I didn't mean to say that.
But no, but that's good. That's because it is.
Yeah.
It's I think that most of my students, when you start talking about academic skills, their eyes glass over.
Glaze over.
Right, exactly. And
Yeah.
then it's like, how is this pertinent to me? However, if you begin to, discuss the various kinds of ammunition they can have in a given, first-person shooter, they can, wax poetic, right? So if we can engage them through play for that level of knowledge. I had a student just the other day who told me that he couldn't explain the order of operations in mathematics, but he could explain every Pokemon card, what it was and why you'd want to have it as, So he was saying if we can find a way to get REMDAS as a form of play, then you're going to engage me more.
Now, you're at the college level and you're a middle school, high school. So do you see the role of games from where to where in the school, in the life of a person's education? Would you say from K through post-secondary, or do you, where do games come in to the curriculum?
I think it's certainly easier the younger grades that you teach, because a lot of games are published and they're out there in the sort of general realm. I think when you get to college games, maybe they're fewer.
I think there definitely are fewer, but I think that the life of it is as long as the life of the player. I don't think that I still play games constantly, and I create games to teach myself things.
And at Quest to Learn, the teachers are designing the games, like at the Hive. So you can come up with a learning goal, and you're working with the game designer to develop that game. And I think in that sense, you're making sure it's valuable and it can be used at any level.
Let's talk about Quest to Learn, because I must say that until this program, I really was unaware of the school.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about what makes it special, where it's located, and about the philosophy that guides Quest to Learn.
Okay. Well, first of all, Quest to Learn, a lot of people think it's a charter school. And I think one of the amazing things about it, it is a public school. It's in Chelsea. It's 6 through 12, and we're still growing, so we don't have a senior class yet. We will next year. And the idea of Quest is that teachers build curricula and work with game designers and curriculum developers to basically come up with game-like experiences and a mission. So we have trimesters, and every mission is broken up into quests. So the idea is, like in a video game, as you go through each quest, you build skills, and then the final task is boss level. And in our school, that's a sort of week-long design challenge that the kids compete in at the end of the trimester, and that's how we structure curriculum 6 through 12.
Can we talk about some of the specific games and activities that go along with games, and maybe we can even look at some of them? Tell us a little about some specific things that you're doing.
Okay, so right now I'm teaching the metric system in one of my TW classes, science, and Metric Mystery is one of the games. I also use a game that's on BrainPop, which is called Ratio Rumble, and that's something we just used. And just like the game is sort of hiding that mathematical content, the kids are making potions and recipes. And to sort of advance in the game, they need to make larger and larger recipes. So they have to scale the recipe and make a proportion, but they don't know that. And so I can sort of walk around the room while they're playing, and if they're only on level 2, I can just sort of quickly know that they're not scaling up their recipe or making duplicates, triples, quadruples. And so
Did they also design games themselves, like a video game, or?
The children?
Yeah.
So we have kids helping us design games. So right now, my curriculum developer, Leah, and another teacher, we're building a fraction, decimal, and percent game called The Whole Enchilada. It's not finished yet.
Okay.
But the kids get to play test, and they say, okay, this is an engaging part of the game. This is something we don't like. And so that's something that we do that the kids
Do you have
a
any
say.
video here today that we can take a look
I
at?
do.
And what game is this?
So I have a video which is a student building a roller coaster in Minecraft. So Minecraft, you know, if you're over the age of 35, you might not know what it is.
Guilty.
But it's sort of, there's a couple different ways you can play, but it's the way we use it at school is a virtual sandbox, and the kids can build things in it. And so the project they did in Minecraft was to make a roller coaster that had various slopes, and it had to be a working roller coaster, and that was Code Worlds, which is a math ELA subject area domain, and that was the project that they had to do, and we have a video.
Let's take a look.
Hello, people, and welcome to Leia and David's Minecraft roller coaster. The roller coaster starts here, and it goes off. This is our first slope. It's a slope of 0 because it's just going on a flat plane. Then we have the slope of 1 because it's going up 1, goes up 1, goes forward 1 and up 1. And we have the slope of -1 because it goes forward 1 and down 1. And this would be the fastest part of our roller coaster because the incline is the steepest. Then we have the hills over here, which just go up and down, up and down.
Just for fun.
Yes. Then we go up here and we reach our second slope. This is a slope of 0.5 because it goes forward 2 and up 1. Then we have no slope at all. It just goes straight down, or it might be called undefined slope. Then we have a slope of 1/3 because it goes forward 3 and up 1, therefore creating that slope. Then we keep going up the staircase. And here's a tunnel in the sky. And then you go wee down the staircase. Keep falling and falling. Let's skip this. Okay, let's not skip this. Until you reach this tunnel. This is the second tunnel. It goes underground until it reaches back to the starting point.
That's awesome. I love the application of slope and how he or the students at least that are describing it are explaining that through the rise and fall or how deep or yeah.
And this is a game I think that has the most mass appeal because kids out there are playing it now and they can do this at home. They don't even need to have a teacher telling them to do this, but if someone was encouraging them, it's a learning task that anyone could do right now. If they're
How
into
do
the game.
you feel that this taught the concept of slope better than or differently than the traditional way of teaching those concepts in a math classroom?
I think the slopes that it taught the best were the no slope, kind of that drop, that vertical drop, and then a slope of 0. Those were the concepts I think it taught the best. It's just, they were just so much more engaged, and they really wanted to create a roller coaster that had different experiences, you know, going up quickly, positive slope, negative slope. So maybe not the fractions themselves, like change in y over change in x, but the idea of a positive slope and a negative slope, that was the biggest outcome. But this was also a 7th grade class, and so for them to have that level of fluency, to me, is a huge
I thought it
success.
was amazing.
Yeah.
And since you're both involved in designing games, what are some of the principles that you use for designing a game, and how do you ensure that you're creating games that people, kids, adults, are going to like to play?
Iteration, testing the designs with the intended audience. I tell all of my design students that if you're not iterating, you're not actually designing. And so that's a big part of it. We, at Hostos, we sat, my colleague Catherine Cannon and I sat down with a wide group of cross-disciplinary professors to find learning outcomes that their students were having particular issue with. And we then sat down and took those and really addressed them as variables and then created themes or narratives to work with them around. We then set up a rule set and started playing them with target students from the remedial math classes or science classes that we were addressing, and from the very beginning just got their feedback and how to get, this would be so much more fun if I had the opportunity to, I don't know, strategize to get my opponent's pieces away or whatever it might be. And then really just kept applying and applying until we got to levels that the students were really enjoying. And then we introduced them to a new class of students, new group of students, who didn't know that this was a learning exercise. And at the end of it, we started talking to them about the science or the math that the games were about. And they were far more fluent than we would have anticipated they would have been otherwise.
And what do you say about how do you know that the games are going to be enjoyable?
Teaching middle school and high school,
That's a tough audience.
You know really quickly
That's
if
true, right.
it's going to work. I do believe play testing, sort of trying the game out with a small group will let you know if it's going to have the desired effect, and then iterating. So we have a core value at Quest that failure is reframed as iteration. So when the kids have a design challenge for themselves, to look at failure not like the end point to the learning objective, but as just another step.
Now, there's a lot of research. I mean, I was going through some of it about the benefits of game playing. I know some people say, oh, games, what's the role of that in the classroom? That's, ridiculous. What do you say to that? And what does the research show about some of the benefits for kids of playing games? And young adults as well, adults.
The concept that any form of engagement would be dismissed from a classroom, to me, is just outrageous.
It's ludicrous. All right.
Yeah, right. So if you find a way to contact and communicate what you're searching for with your students, that's the score. And so I think that games for us often, or at least play, right, and the exploration of play, offer up a whole level of engagement that is consistent and that keeps the students coming back.
And also, when you play a game, it's not a standalone lesson.
Yeah.
You're going to have a meaningful discussion about it. You're going to talk about the design. You're going to talk about leverage points in the game. Hopefully, you have some sort of scaffolded assessment that will bring that game back and actually bring out the content. So I think, some teachers will use a game and it's just a freebie. I don't have to plan anything else for today. Right. But that's not how we incorporate games. It has to be meaningful, and you have to be able to use it multiple times to have an effect.
Now, you work with college students, and Jim Carney did have the opportunity to go to Hostos and to meet with some of the people on your team and look at some games. Can you set up for us a little bit about what we're going to be seeing in terms of games at Hostos? And what is your program called?
All right. So this is a National Science Foundation grant that we got, that Catherine Cannon and I got for the college to develop game-framed math and science classes. And we did a lot of research that involved a lot of what you all have been doing for years when we started this enterprise. And what happens is you have basically a hat trick that goes on, a cognitive hat trick. The initial goal comes from traditional lesson plans lecture, right? The second goal comes from playing games that relate to the subject matter. And the third comes from a boss level challenge where students develop their own games that they use as study aids.
Okay, let's
what you're
take
seeing,
a look
what you're
see.
about to see, it basically involves some of that second stage.
Great, good. Let's take a look.
I shuffled.
What exactly are we seeing here today?
It would have been a bad show.
We're going to see a group of Math 20 students who have just left their standard lecture class and come in, and they're going to play a game about linear equation. It's based on Go and Othello. It's a game that we developed 2 summers ago with a group, The Hive, and we developed it according to what professors told us were big problems that students had. One of them in Math 20 was linear equations. So we developed a game that incorporates linear equations. You have to be able to understand linear equations to not only win, but also play the game. A lot of our students come in thinking that they can't do math, or they failed at math already on the first day. And so what we're trying to do is figure out different ways to teach math concepts. Because if you have a student who is an A student, a good student, and just can't pass their math class, that has less to say about the student and more to say about how math is taught. And so what we're trying to do is figure out different ways to teach subjects that have been taught the same ways for almost 100 years.
Professor Dennis Bates is a microbiology professor at Hostos Community College. How do you incorporate teaching biology?
Right. Well, what I do as far as incorporating the general bio is that I introduce a topic, and in this topic, let's say whether it's genetics or ecology or whatever the case may be, I try to introduce the salient, the important points, and then the students pick up from that and they decide on what's really significant, the highlights of it, and so on like that, to make cards or assemble some other game pieces so that all together they can make a game, and then from that they can decide who of the various teams wins, who has the most points, etc. So that this way it's a nice competition. It's a competition whereby they're learning from each other. So everybody gains, nobody loses.
Dylan Shad is the Hostos Hive Collective game designer and content development director. How does one become a game developer?
Honestly, to just start making games and playing games and looking at the way systems work and the way that we can take systems and create fun and playful interactions from these systems. Because that's all a game is.
How is that different from doing maybe creating digital games?
Well, with digital games, what you have is you've got a lot of flashy things that a lot of people go to immediately draw engagement and create more inspiring interaction from the users. And often in the case of educational games, what happens, the reason why they have such a bad reputation is because a lot of people have done this at the cost of spending time making sure that the actual interactions are fun, that the game itself is something that you would play if you weren't learning from it. I think that's really been the core of what we've been trying to do, trying to make a game or make a series of games that are fun and get the students to stop thinking about the fact that they're learning because they're just having fun.
Now back to Linda and her guests in the studio.
So, any reactions? You've never seen this before. I do want to ask you both then, the idea of a digital game versus an analog game, what do you think of those differences? And
I think an analog game is easier to share in terms of licensing and things like that. I think a lot of teachers have a phobia around digital technology, at least some teachers. So having something that's analog feels safer. And you can also have more control. You know the kids are not on another website or doing something they shouldn't be. So
It's also cheaper to develop and iterate. So for us, the Hive has created 26 games at this point for the GFMS project. About half of them are fully produced and being used. Now that we've actually gotten some good feedback about their playability, we can consider the expense of digitizing them. But it's a big chunk of change, so that's another grant.
there's been a lot of talk about girls not engaging in video games the same way that boys do. And some researchers, scholars are even saying that girls are at a deficit in a game-oriented world. Are you seeing any gender differences in how games are approached?
Well, I don't think that there's a female deficit in the education world. So where I have empathy for that scenario, I don't think we need to worry. I don't think girls are a disadvantage in education. I think they're actually making gains beyond their male counterpoints at this point. So I think if we are engaging those boys with the games at this point, it's okay.
Yeah, I think that when young women are not as engaged in the game, that's because the designers aren't designing to them.
And do you think though that the games themselves, I know James G, for example, thinks that games really teach problem-solving skills and things that are really important. So you feel that both boys and girls are able now to take advantage of that.
At Quest, we work with Institute of Play, and last night we did a play testing session where we were looking at new games that are coming out, and we were actually talking about the avatar. Can we make it more feminine? Can we make it appeal to girls? So it is something that we're thinking about.
I know there's a look toward making games solve real-world problems, and we actually did a show with John Hunter when he talked about solving world peace, you know, having fourth graders play a game that helped develop world peace. Have you seen games being used in this way, and do you feel there's a future for games in terms of solving not just educational math concepts, but the world in which we live in, those kinds of problems?
Wow, that's a big question. I think one of the biggest problems that we have in the world is people can't talk to each other. They can't have debates. And we do have a game at Quest called Socratic Smackdown, and it's available on our website.
Well,
or
certainly
on
if
the
you're playing an
Institute of
analog
Play.
game, you may talk more to each other.
But it's a structured way to have a discussion and have a debate without hurting
Okay.
anyone's feelings. So that can help.
And I mean, 2 points. First thing is my son, 6 years ago or so, was very, very involved with a game called EVE Online. It was a sandbox video game, voice monitoring system, so he could actually be communicating with other players. And one of the players he was playing with for years ended up being the Libyan ambassador, a gentleman who was killed in Libya a few years ago. And the entire gaming community of EVE Online, it's a globally connected group of players, was reacting and talking about how this political situation was affecting them, but how they might actually have effect on that. So right there it became, I mentioned this because of the fact that, digitally we're talking too. Secondly, in terms of changing the world, the Game Frame Math and Science Initiative, the folks who are designing it are these group of designers that you've just met, the Hive. And the Hive is currently working with an international NGO to develop games to help further a product that is basically used for malnourished kids around the world. Someone did some research and recognized that we get 350 more calories in these kids around the world who are dying of hunger. We would get 40% survival rate. Improve it 40%. And so the games that we're designing right now are to help create a way to get this product out to the masses.
We are running out of time, so briefly, each of you, what would you like to see happening next in the world of game design in education?
You know, now you challenge us with saving the world, so
I hope that you will leave here.
You know, if we can create students.
I got that idea from Jane McGonigal, not me.
If we can encourage kids to be systems thinkers, and they go into the world, and they're, you know, climate change is a system. If they want to find a leverage point and help that, that's what we're, as teachers, that's what we want to support that.
Yeah, and games encourage problem solving and learning really on your toes, right? And that's the kind of people we need in our communities.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Rees Shad, Kate Selkirk, and we are going to go back to playing Now and Then. So thank you again for joining us on EdCast.
Thanks for having us.
You're welcome. Say, don't go anywhere yet. Rees, your turn. They'll tell us when. Go.
Okay. So I guess I roll.
We'd love to have your opinion, so please email us at cunyedcast@gmail.com.
Well, I don't know about you, but I'm ready to head to the casino and learn how to win money. I don't know if they teach you that at Hostos or at the middle school.
And I'm afraid we did not discuss this today at all. However, it was interesting looking at the differences between using analog and digital games and the role for both of them in the classroom
that's
today.
True.
That was really interesting.
And one of the things I was thinking about, and I even mentioned it to our guests earlier, that I doubt there's any world leader that did not learn how to play the game Risk as a child. Well, in any event, that does it for this edition of EdCast.
Until next time, class dismissed.